This is the full story of how the Chief of Staff, Nigerian Army, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, succeeded Major General Johnson Thomas Aguiyi-Ironsi as Nigeria's head of state on August 1, 1966. Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon played a significant role in crushing the January 15, 1966 coup, of which, as a senior army officer, he was targeted to be killed by the coup plotters. In fact, Gowon was to take over command of the 2nd Battalion Ikeja from Colonel Hilary Njoku on that fateful day. With Major Hans Egaga, a Cameroonian, Gowon and other officers loyal to the government crushed the coup in Lagos. When Aguiyi-Ironsi eventually assumed power as head of state and supreme commander, he catapulted Gowon to the post of Chief of Staff, Army, as the position was then known. The appointment was not just because Gowon was the most senior surviving northern military officer to ease tensions, but based on his relationship with Aguiyi-Ironsi during their time in London. At first, the coup was popular both in the north and south. However, when emotions died down and news of sexual killings filtered to the north, there was tension, first in the army and among the civilian population. The northerners started holding secret meetings while planning a counter-coup to avenge the deaths of their civilian and military leaders who had been murdered in January. 6 months later, on July 29, 1966, Nigeria's bloodiest coup happened. This coup, also called the July Remarch or the Northern Counter-Coup, would claim the life of Nigeria's first military head of state, Major General Johnson Thomas Aguiyi-Ironsi. Many officers and soldiers of Igbo extraction would also lose their lives. Those who escaped lost their positions. This bloody coup would lead to the emergence of Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon as Nigeria's second military head of state. But what led to the July 29, 1966 coup? By mid-1966, Nigeria's first military coup on January 15 had been largely considered a plot born out of tribal sentiment and particularly initiated by the Igbos. Both the foreign and local media at the time were said to have felt this notion with repeated broadcasts analyzing why the January coup was an Igbo coup. For about 3 weeks, Radio Kaduna broadcasted speeches of the murdered Ahmadu Bello and Tafawa Balewa. This was believed to have stirred up tribal sentiments and negative feelings towards the South. Even though the coup failed, lives were lost, most of which were northerners. And to add salt to injury, the coup plotters were neither tried nor executed. There were also rumors that they were still being paid while in prison. The rage from the north was loud and clear, but the ruling head of state, General Aguiyi-Ironsi, was reluctant to put the conspirators on trial. The northerners feared that all of the preceding events were part of a grand plot to give the Igbos dominance of the country. When promotions were to take place within the army, 25 officers were promoted, of which 19 of them were Igbos and Midwesterners, 5 from the north and 1 Yoruba officer from the southwest. Even though the promotions were merited by these officers in question, there were already preconceived notions of favoritism that would not die down easily. To cap it all, there were accusations that the Supreme Commander gave special preference to Southerners in his cabinet. The tipping point had been Aguiyi-Ironsi's decision to do away with regionalism and to operate a unitary system of government. The head of state believed the Unification Decree No. 34 would help restore peace and unity to Nigeria. The general had been advised against it earlier by several northern officials, but he ignored their advice. This further confirmed the suspicions of the northerners, and on May 24, 1966, Aguiyi-Ironsi passed the decree. Just like the Westerners had earlier done in the First Republic that had earned the region the name the Wild West, the Northerners also decided to take laws into their own hands. As a result of the delayed trial of the coup plotters, which many Northerners considered lenient and inappropriate, they went on a rampage, killing thousands of Igbos and other Southerners living in the north. The killings went on for months, starting from around May 1966 until October of the same year. About 50,000 Igbos were reportedly killed during this pogrom. The slaughter reached its peak on September 29, 1966, which has been referred to as a Black Thursday. About 1 million Igbos fled back to the east to escape the massacre. There were also retaliations in eastern cities, particularly Port Harcourt, where the Northerners were also murdered. This led to the Northerners fleeing the eastern region for safety. Nigeria as a country was barely 6 years into independence and seemed to be falling apart already. During this chaos and 6 months after the first coup, a group of northern officers decided to oust the sitting government. This coup, popularly referred to as the July Remarch, would be bloodier than the first and would claim the lives of almost 10 times the initial number of lives claimed in the January coup. The code name for this counter-coup was Araba, a Hausa coinage that was interpreted as "Let us separate." The coup plotters wanted to secede, causing the northern region to stand on its own. Led by Lieutenant Colonel Muritala Mohammed, the Inspector of Signals, the principal plotters of the coup were about 30 in number. Lieutenant Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi had been playing host to Major General Aguiyi-Ironsi when they were both kidnapped from the State House and murdered. The counter-coup began on the night of July 28, 1966, 6 months and 13 days after the first coup. Despite various attempts by Aguiyi-Ironsi to pacify the northerners, it seemed they were bent on having their pound of flesh. The coup was postponed on different occasions due to last-minute changes, but its time came when Aguiyi-Ironsi decided to go on a nationwide tour. The mutineers had been warned not to kill the general on northern soil, and so they had to wait. When Ironsi got to Ibadan while on his tour, he was hosted by the military governor of the Western region, Lieutenant Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi. Unfortunately for the head of state, in a bid to prove that he was not showing any form of favoritism to the Igbos, he surrounded himself with northerners. His security guards consisted largely of northerners, 2 of which were among the principal plotters of the coup: Major Theophilus Yakubu Danjuma and Lieutenant William Walbe. The trigger for the July coup started in Abeokuta. Rumors of an impending coup had got to Lieutenant Colonel Gabriel Okowenze, commanding officer of the Abeokuta unit, who made futile attempts to rally his troops. Shortly after, Okowenze, Major John Obieno, commander of the Risk Squadron, and Lieutenant Colonel Orok were gunned down. This was the same Obieno who had been originally part of the January coup but failed to show up on D-Day. The officers who led this attack were Sergeant Sabo Kwale and Corporal Misamari Maje. Frantic calls were made to Lagos to salvage the growing mayhem, but turned out to fuel the flame as it alerted coup plotters positioned in other parts of the country. Lieutenant Nuhu Nathan, who had received the call from Lagos, alerted the coup leaders, Lieutenant Colonel Murtala Mohammed and Major Martin Adamu, who gave the go-ahead for the coup to commence in other parts of the country. In Abeokuta, Igbo soldiers were singled out and executed. The same was said to have happened in Lagos, Ibadan, Kaduna, and Kano. Ikeja had become the ad hoc headquarters of the coup as the airport had been forcefully taken over by a team of soldiers led by Murtala Mohammed. The coup plotters planned to secede from Nigeria and also sent their families home to the north using one of the British aeroplanes after the coup was over. In Ibadan, by the next morning, a team of soldiers led by Danjuma stormed the government house. Danjuma was said to have received a call from Gowon, during which he informed the senior officer of the coup and planned to arrest Aguiyi-Ironsi, to which Gowon asked whether Danjuma could do it and afterwards cautioned him to avoid bloodshed. Many believed Yakubu Gowon had secretly been a partaker in the July coup. This was due to his sudden absence from the day the coup started to August 1, 1966, when he was announced as the new head of state. The phone conversation he had with Major Danjuma about Aguiyi-Ironsi also fanned the flames of the suspicions of many. Danjuma could not have initiated that line of conversation without Gowon having prior knowledge of their plans. Also, Gowon was supposed to have accompanied General Ironsi on his nationwide tour as the Army Chief of Staff. If he was not available, the next in command was the General Staff Officer Grade 1, Lieutenant Colonel Awona, who should have accompanied the General. But for some reason, Gowon appointed Major Theophilus Danjuma, a Grade 2 Staff Officer and Deputy to Lieutenant Colonel Mike Evenso, the Adjutant General of the Army, to accompany the Supreme Commander, eventually leading him into the cold hands of death. Aguiyi-Ironsi and Fajuyi were abducted along with their aides de camp. They were beaten and interrogated. The captors questioned the general about his involvement in the January 15, 1966 coup, which he denied. The two officers were eventually dragged to a bush and shot, while their aides managed to escape. Their bodies were discovered in shallow graves on the outskirts of Ibadan some days later. It took about 6 months before they were both officially declared dead by Gowon and given a military burial. Over the next 3 days, negotiations were held in Ikeja over the Northerners' call for secession. However, the British and American ambassadors were able to convince them why Nigeria needed to be one country. Subsequently, they agreed on the condition that a Northerner, not a Southerner, was made head of state. In a twist of fate, Aguiyi-Ironsi's Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, who had been sent by Brigadier Babafemi Ogundipe to negotiate with the rebels, however, emerged as Nigeria's second military head of state on August 1, 1966. Gowon would go on to rule Nigeria for nearly 9 years until he was overthrown in a bloodless coup on July 29, 1975. The next day, July 30, 1975, one of the officers who led the coup that brought Gowon into office, 36-year-old Brigadier Murtala Mohammed, succeeded the 40-year-old Yakubu Gowon as head of state. However, Murtala Mohammed, like Aguiyi-Ironsi, spent just 6 months in office, and on February 13, 1976, he was assassinated by soldiers who were mainly from the same Middle Belt region as Gowon. These soldiers were led by Lieutenant Colonel Bukasuka Dimka. You can learn more about the Dimka coup in our next episode.